All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Thomas and I do educational material. Today is the 115th video on the reciprocal system of theory. And this is, I believe, the 93rd video on his final book that is called Beyond Space and Time. And the reciprocal system of theory is a theory of everything that started out with Dewey Larson's first intuitions into this, what he calls the universe of motion. Way back around 1930, he developed those ideas painstakingly over the next 20 or 25 years, came out with his fundamental postulates in the late 1950s. The basic idea is that we live in a universe of motion, not a universe of matter, not a universe of energy. Matter and energy are, in fact, just specific kinds of motion, as is every other physical unit out there, such as pressure and magnetic flux and mass. Well, I said mass, and acceleration and force and, density, obviously. These are all relationships between space and time. Motion is a relationship between space and time. Space and time are both non-existent, other than how they exist together in motion. They do not exist separately. Now, you can abstract them and kind of pretend as if they exist separately in order to make calculations and so on. It's kind of like calculus or something, where you pretend that this ideal thing is happening, but matter, time and space do not exist separately, only together in motion. And space and time, as a result, are nothing but reciprocals of each other. In the same way that 3/4 and 4/3 are reciprocal of each other. They are inverses of each other. They are, you invert one to get the other. And this basic postulate, his main postulate, he basically kind of made that an assumption, and he then derived an entire universe from this initial postulate. I went through that in about 15 videos a few months ago, going over his paper, The Outline of the Deductive Development of the Reciprocal System. So if you want to go back, you can kind of watch his step-by-step development of how the reciprocal system works. We will be getting into that later as well, but after these postulates, he came out with started writing books. And his first book was called The Case Against the Nuclear Atom. And then he came out with his Structure of the Physical Universe. Eventually, he put this out in kind of a second volume of 3 different books that were all on physics, chemistry, and astronomy. We'll go over those books later. But then he died in 1990, and after he died, his wife put out this book, Beyond Space and Time. And this is his foray into metaphysics, into philosophy, religion, and psychology, and other woo-woo subjects, as opposed to the hard science that he was doing earlier. A lot of his adherents thought it was blasphemy, that Larson would have never wanted this to be published. But here it is. So we're looking at it. Now, the other things about space and time being reciprocals about each other, the consequences, immediate consequences, is that space and time both have the same general qualities. What we know about space is that it is always it's multidimensional, three or more dimensions, and therefore time is also three or more dimensions in its proper context. And that is what Larson calls coordinate time and coordinate space. And then what we know about time is that it's always getting later and later. It's always progressing. Time is flowing. And Larson calls that clock time, and its correspondent is clock space. Everything in the universe is moving faster and faster away from each other. And that is seen by the Hubble telescope in the recession of the distant galaxies. Also, time and space are both only in discrete units. They do not come in half units or continuous parts or anything like that. They are chunks, discrete units, and exactly 1 unit of time, 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is the speed of light. So the speed of light for Einstein was the maximum speed of the universe, but for Larson, it is the midpoint of the universe. And there is an entire half of the universe that's moving faster than the speed of light. He calls that sector 2, or the cosmic sector. Sector 1 is the material sector that we are familiar with, that is moving slower than the speed of light. And that sector aggregates, bonds together to get to its most complex level, which Larson says is DNA. At that level, DNA is able to accommodate a unit from the cosmic sector. And that cosmic sector unit is what Larson calls a control unit. It controls the entire entity in the same way that a thermostat controls a room. It's just a very small part of that room, but it controls the environment. And so too with the sector 2 entity controlling the overall sector 1 and sector 2 combination, which Larson refers to as the life unit. Life is the combination of a material and cosmic entity. And that life unit starts out as a single-celled organism, but it evolves and develops over time up to its most complex level, which Larson says is the intelligent human or humanoid. And that being at that point becomes eligible to accommodate an entity from sector 3. And sector 3 is the region that is completely outside of the space and time, independent of space and time, or as the title of his final book, Beyond Space and Time. This metaphysical region, sector 3, what other people would call God or religious or spiritual. And this sector 3 entity communicates with the intelligent humans through things such as ESP, intuition, revelation, and insight. And the communications that we receive from sector 3 are always correct, because sector 3 is good, nothing but good. And it's what Larson calls ethical or moral communications that we're getting from them. Unfortunately, as basically single-celled spiritual organisms, we are not quite equipped to take these messages and decode them properly. And so getting these messages from sector 3 is kind of a mixed bag. But as we, evolve spiritually, we will become more and more adept at decoding these messages, understanding them. We have a lot of work to do in terms of our dedication to this, in terms of our preparation for this, in terms of our concentration for this. And when those things improve, then we will be getting a much clearer channel from these various sector 3 forms of communication. Okay, so that is kind of where we're at right now. Now, we're in Larson's final chapter of this book, which is called Human Destiny. And he had just got done talking about how, what happens to us after we die. And he's saying, cited a few experts that said, "Oh, human beings are not ready for heaven. We haven't. We have a lot of work to do before we can even go to heaven." And so Larson has said that there's really two different ways that we can bypass these requirements. One is by fiat, which he says is the way that the Western religions, handle that. And then the second one is through a kind of a long transition phase where we prepare ourselves more and more. And he says this is the Eastern approach, and that's where we'll start right here. Most of the Eastern religion, all of them, some writers say, embrace the second of the alternatives mentioned by McTaggart and assert that after death, each individual returns to earthly existence in association with a different physical body and begins another life. In association with a different physical body and begins another life. Just what it is that is supposed to pass from one body to the other on the basis of this hypothesis is not clear. All that is essential to the idea is a continuity from life to life, whether this continuity is provided by a persistent entity or in some other way is a secondary question. Buddhism explicitly repudiates, he says, the notion of some substantive entity which persists through successive incarnations. Yet the canonical writings of Buddha describe the experiences of the Buddha himself in some of his previous incarnations. Evidently, the repudiation of any substantive entity is a matter of semantics, a question as to what constitutes substance. At present, the Western religions are strongly opposed to the reincarnation idea. And to the reader who has been brought up in the Western tradition, it may seem that this is something which is entitled to no more than a summary dismissal. In light of our previous findings with respect to the nature of intuition, we might even be entitled to give some consideration to the possibility that the rejection of reincarnation by Western man may be a valid intuitive understanding rather than a product of religious indoctrination. But whatever weight this possibility may be given is nullified by the widespread acceptance of the reincarnation concept among the Eastern peoples, which may equally well be intuitive. Indeed, as Leslie Weatherhead reminds us, reincarnation was once a Christian doctrine. Now, not that many Christians talk about that, and I hear a lot of Christians really, being very critical of the reincarnation idea and kind of throwing it away as being, even satanic or certainly barbaric. But as Larson continues, or he's actually quoting Weatherhead here, it was accepted by the early Christian church for the first 500 years of its existence. Only in AD 553 did the Second Council of Constantinople reject the idea of reincarnation, and only then by a narrow majority. It seems quite a shock to some people even to contemplate such a possibility, but it would be unspeakable arrogance on the part of us in the West to dismiss without examination an idea current since the 6th century BC and held tenaciously by all Buddhists and Hindus, that is by about 500 million people, which is much more than that now, many of whom are deep thinkers, saints, mystics, and profound scholars. Thus, back to Larson, as matters now stand, we have no direct evidence from either physical or intuitive sources which would confirm or refute the reincarnation hypothesis. We can, however, approach the question indirectly by considering the various available items of information that have some bearing on the issue. The criticism of reincarnation that is most effective in the Western world, aside from the rather vague religious objections, rests on the fact that we do not remember any previous lives. It seems to most persons that if we have lived before, there should be a general ability to remember at least some of our previous experiences. Of course, there are few persons who claim to have such memories, but the circumstances surrounding these claims are such that they are received with skepticism. A second major objection that is advanced is that an individual's knowledge, skills, habits, etc., are all determined either by heredity or by environmental factors and cannot be carried forward to a new heredity and a new environmental experience. What then is left to be transferred? The critics ask. The tendency in religious and philosophical circles to identify the physical body as an essential component of the human personality likewise stands in the way of a more general acceptance of the reincarnation concept. From this viewpoint, continuity of personal identity is impossible without resurrection of the body. Theologians assure us that resurrection, will be corporeal. Our body will be involved because we are bodily creatures, and to the extent that we are separated from our bodies, our personalities are incomplete, says Andrew Greeley. Back to Larson, the findings of this present work draw the teeth from all of these criticisms. These results show that the physical body is an assemblage of motions, and the physical processes of that body are likewise nothing but motions. All of these motions are phenomena of the physical universe, a universe of motion, and they can have no existence apart from that universe. Continued or renewed existence of the physical body in some post-human life after it has been destroyed by the physical processes that follow death is therefore impossible. I'll read that again. Continued or renewed existence of the physical body in some post-human life after it has been destroyed by the physical processes that follow death is therefore impossible. Memories are physical phenomena, and they terminate with the rest of physical existence. Similarly, hereditary and acquired skills are properties of the biological component of the physical mechanism, and they too cease to exist when physical life comes to an end. But the physical body and its processes are not the true human individual. They are merely the biological portion of the human composite, the part of existence that we share with the animals and lower organisms. The essence of the human personality is the non-physical component, the distinctly human aspect of existence that animals do not possess. That which persists in this Sector 3 component, the aspect of the personality that is not physical. I'll read that sentence again. That which persists is this Sector 3 component, the aspect of the personality that is not physical. This entity can be roughly identified with the soul or spirit. Although these concepts usually associated with these terms are rather vague and nebulous and do not reflect the active part which the Sector 3 component of the personality plays in the daily life of the human individual. It is this significant non-physical part of the human personality that survives death. And if there is any such thing as reincarnation, it is this non-physical entity that is transferred to a new physical structure. The religious insistence on the resurrection of the body, particularly in the Christian theologies, is rather difficult to understand. In the book from which the statement by Andrew Greeley was taken, the author continues with these words, quote, "The physical human body that we now possess, presumably transformed in some marvelous fashion, is destined for resurrection, and this no Christian can deny." But, that's an end quote. But St. Paul, who laid the foundation for Christian theology, did deny this specifically. He asserted categorically that it is not the natural body that is resurrected, but the spiritual body, a body that, as he said, does not bear the image of the earthly. This is essentially the same conclusion that has emerged from our investigation. So Larson is agreeing with Paul, and he says that Paul asserted categorically that it is not the natural body that is resurrected, but the spiritual body, a body that, as he said, does not bear the, quote, image of the earthly. Okay, back to Larson. The physical body is a piece of equipment that the human individual must possess in order to take part in life in the physical universe, just as he must possess a boat if he has to take part in marine activities. The point brought out in the last chapter is that the death of the human individual is like the sinking of the boat. It terminates the particular kind of activities for which a special unit of equipment is required, but it does not prevent the individual from being active in some other environment. What we are now considering is the possibility that the deceased human individual may do something equivalent to buying a new boat, so that he may resume the kind of activities that were interrupted by death. Thus, in the light of our new findings, the usual objections that have been raised to the general concept of reincarnation are without merit. On the other hand, there are adequate grounds for rejecting some of the specific beliefs of those who regard the reincarnation process as a reality. The idea that a person will return to a higher or lower station in life, depending on the nature of his conduct during the previous existence, cannot be entertained, as there is nothing to indicate that any one human situation is superior to another from the Sector 3 standpoint. The further extension of this idea to include life as an animal is totally unacceptable, as animals do not participate in Sector 3 existence at all. Another belief widely held in the East that must be rejected is that whatever evil and suffering a person encounters in his earthly life are punishments for his misdeeds in his earlier incarnations. As emphasized in the last chapter, the evils of human life are phenomena of the physical factors of existence as a whole, and they do not survive death in any form. There is no posthumous punishment. The absence of any valid argument against the reality of reincarnation does not prove that such a process exists. Oh boy, it looks like we're going too far here. Okay, I guess that is the end. We will get back to this from this point or even further back next time. So have a great day. We'll talk to you later.